Hello. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the edible plants in my yard. Some of these are wild, some of them I've planted myself, and I'm going to start with this one in front of me. So, this is a gooseneck loosestrife. It's a weed native to Asia, but it's edible. It has these long, thin leaves, pointed on the end. I have eaten these leaves, and from my experience, they actually don't taste very good, at least for me. They're edible, but they have kind of a weird taste, bit sour, and their texture's a little weird, kind of weird mushy taste. I still eat them in small quantities, usually mixed in with other plants. Look for this plant. I mean, they have these long, thin leaves, obviously. They also have these white flowers. Now, if this was earlier in the season, it would have this big flower spike covered with these little white flowers. Most of the flowers are dead now, but there's still some on them. They also have these red stems. They do not appear to have any hairs on them, so they have smooth red stems without hairs. So now I'm going to move on to the next plant. Alright, so this is an evening primrose. They can grow tall like this, although this one grew kind of funky, but it's tall and thin, or it can be branched and more bushy, but this is another weed, and similar to the loosestrife, it has these long, thin leaves pointed at the tip, although they can sometimes have hairs on them. They're kind of fuzzy. Tend to have hairs on them. They also have these yellow flowers. From what I've read, these are edible as well. I haven't tried eating them, though I probably will at some point. Bees love these flowers too. And similar to the loosestrife, they tend to have these reddish stems, although they can be green. I have seen green ones. There's actually several species of these in my yard. These tend to have these hairs on them, though. They tend to be fuzzy compared to the loosestrife, and they tend to grow very tall, taller than the loosestrife. You can see this is actually growing with the loosestrife. You can see how tall they can get really tall sometimes, depending on the species and conditions they're growing in. Another plant that's growing over here is Asiatic dayflower. I know I have another plant here from Asia that grows like a weed, but it's edible. So this plant has these almost grass-like leaves on them, and these blue flowers. They have these two blue flowers. They're yellow in the middle. Both the leaves and the flowers are edible. Technically the stems can be eaten too, but they're hard to eat. They're tough. If anyone here watching this video has had tried eating mint while it's still on the stem, it's kind of like that. The flowers I've made into tea. It actually tastes pretty good. Same thing with the leaves. So I'll make an herbal tea, have some vegetables, wild vegetables. One thing about this plant, there is a grass that looks very similar to this. It has very similar stem, very similar leaves, lacks the blue flowers, and it has hairs on its stem. Matter of fact, I can show you the grass I'm talking about. So we have some over here. I've piled a bunch of stuff on it because I actually don't like this grass. So this looks very similar to dayflower. Leaves tend to be longer and thinner, and the stems have these hairs on them, and they lack the flowers. They don't have the pretty blue flowers on them. So that's the Asiatic dayflower. And there's some more dayflower. There's a lot of dayflower in the yard, actually. So it looks very similar. And dayflower can get pretty big too. Now it's almost as tall as a loosestrife. Sometimes taller. I think it's competing with the loosestrife, so it's very tall over here. The dayflower in other parts of the yard don't grow this tall. So anyway, moving on. Here we have a couple of dandelion plants. A lot of people already know this is edible, but I'm showing them anyway. So there's actually a couple species that are common backyard weeds. There's this one with the fatter, more rounded leaves, and then there's another one that has more narrow, almost oak-like leaves that are pointed at the end, and they're pointed on the sides, and they're thinner. So the leaves are edible. Supposedly the roots are edible too. As a matter of fact, I think they make what is it, root beer out of them or something, or dandelion wine, some kind of alcoholic drink. I haven't eaten the roots because I want the plant to grow leaves and flowers, but those are apparently edible as well. Supposedly the flowers are edible too. I haven't tried eating those either. I only eat the leaves, really. There are some plants that look very similar to dandelion in the yard. I'm going to show those to avoid any confusion. Here we have a plant that mostly grows in my driveway, although I do see it in the backyard as well. Looks a lot like dandelion, but has these green branch stems, dandelion-like flowers and seed heads, and the leaves are much smaller, and they tend to be very hairy. I'm not aware if this is edible or not. I have not tried it. I've tried researching it, but there's several plants that look like this. I think one was called buckweed or hallweed, or had some weird name. But there's several plants that look like this. I'm going to show some other plants. So this is some kind of tall lettuce plant. During its first year, though, it grows close to the ground. It has these large, almost dandelion-like leaves. Let's see. These plants can look a lot like dandelion when they first sprout. Now, supposedly these actually are edible too, but it's not dandelion, and I haven't tried eating this. It's some kind of species of tall lettuce. It's actually in the same family too. If you look at the flowers, those flowers aren't open. If you're wondering why there's a bunch of fallen ones around it, this is the work of Tropical Storm Henry. It just hit my state a couple days ago. Knocked a bunch of these guys down, but some stood up to the storm. What one of those tall lettuce plants look like in their first year. They're biennials. So first year they grow a rosette of leaves like this. Looks kind of like a dandelion. And then the second year, big shoot comes up. Big flower stalk with leaves. And this plant is the last plant that looks like a dandelion I'm going to show you. So, best way to differentiate this from dandelion, especially when it's young, is its scent. It looks a lot like tall lettuce and dandelion, but it has this funky scent to it. As a matter of fact, I thought it was some kind of skunk weed, but from research, it turns out this actually might be another species of wild lettuce, because I read there are some species of wild lettuce that actually have a weird scent to them. So, this may be edible, but I haven't tried it, and I don't intend on trying it. if you're going to try any plant, any edible plant, make sure you do plenty of research, because you have some plants that are like, some say are edible and some say are toxic, and then you have other plants that have a lot of similar looking plants to them. So here we have a plantain. Not like the banana-like fruit. This is something completely different. And in this case, you actually eat the leaves. Now, on bigger plants like this, it's actually best to eat the smaller leaves. I have consumed the larger, mature leaves, but they do tend to be kind of tough. I mean, you can eat these if you want, but be aware they can be a bit hard to chew, especially the veins running through the leaf. Now, normally they'd also have these tall, thin flower stalks, but my yard got mowed. I think these flower stalks ended up getting chopped off. So I'm going to show you some other ones, though, that are smaller. They're growing near my driveway.